I know I promised that I would keep my talk about Andrew Yang to a minimum this week. However, this was too big to not talk about. This week on the Cynical Centrist Podcast, NBC screws Andrew Yang again out of media coverage. Chicken Sandwich Mania, talking about the third debate, strategies, and the seating charts, and who could break out, and also the climate change town hall. All this and more coming up on the Cynical Centrist Podcast. Cue the music. So you're probably wondering what's going to make me laugh out of Alabama. Well, pretty much everything. But us? No, we don't have to follow those rules. We're the good guys. Could be worse than being a human Cheeto. You could be a clown that does porn. And whenever they say the word realistic, take a drink, you would probably be dead by the end of the night.
If he's not pissing you off, he's not doing his job. This is the Cynical Centrist Podcast.
Now, I know I wasn't going to talk about Andrew Yang this week, but guys, I really have no choice. This is way too important not to talk about. Welcome to the Cynical Centrist Podcast for September 7th, 2019, episode number 16. I am the Cynical Centrist. Couple nights ago, I stayed up until about 3 a.m. doing some research with a bunch of other people who were Andrew Yang supporters, and we found out that it looks like NBC does not like Andrew Yang. Yeah, they don't. And I put up some evidence on my Twitter regarding it. The first thing that we saw was on the short version of the third debate video that they had, they conveniently left out Andrew Yang from the 10 candidates list. Though I will give a shout out to Tai Chi Stripper Pants, a pro wrestler, Tai Chi. And it's a joke account, all right, guys? Anyway, Tai Chi Stripper Pants for saying that In September was counted for, which I found hilarious, by the way. But in reality, yes, he was left out of the short version of the third debate summary that NBC had. Also, NBC left him out of the list of candidates starting August 22nd, and I put up some pictures of the August 22nd, 23rd, and September 1st versions of their candidate list videos to show that Andrew Yang was there on the 22nd, was no longer there on the 23rd, and replaced with Seth Moulton, who is no longer in the race, by the way, and then replaced again and removed in September 1st. To me, this is honestly a facepalm moment, and it definitely reeks of the way that they treated Bernie Sanders in 2016, the way that they were like, oh, Hillary Clinton is in the Democratic primary, and so is Bernie Sanders. And I think that a lot of people who remember 2016 are starting to feel like that they're getting shades of that, especially with Andrew Yang. Now, they can't ignore Bernie Sanders, and they were fine with Tulsi Gabbard up to a point. But when it comes to Andrew Yang, I'm not quite sure what they have a problem. Look, CNN, I know they left out Andrew Yang in a graphic. But to be real, now that I think about it in retrospect, it probably was an honest mistake. All right, and Chris Cillizza did leave out some points as to why he thinks that the media leaves out Andrew Yang, even though he's a lot higher on the polls than they try to show. And I think some of it were decent points. However, I feel like with NBC, it's a whole different layer. I'm not quite sure what it is. And I threw out the race thing a little while back regarding CNN. But with NBC, I feel like that there's something going on there. Someone there is out for Andrew Yang. Either they don't like the way he looks, they don't like, his race. I don't know what it is. It could be that they just don't like that he's an outsider, and NBC is like peak establishment Democrat, as one of my friends had told me. But I will say this, NBC, you got to quit doing this. Let me explain to you why. I know you might think that, they're just 2 to 3% of the population. Even if they all voted for Donald Trump, it's not going to matter in the grand scheme of things. But believe me, people can get pissed at this. And when they get pissed at this, they're not going to vote for the candidate that you handpick for them as the nomination. You just hope that your handpicked or whatever you like for the Democratic nomination wins the nomination fairly. You don't try and make a guy who is slowly creeping up in the polls disappear like he doesn't exist and just assume that his small base is going to, oh, okay, if they vote for Donald Trump, it's not going to matter, even if most of them did, even if all of them did. Because let me tell you something. The 2016 election, it was decided by, if I remember correctly, roughly a couple 100,000 votes in 3 states. And what you're doing here, to me, is with your very, very shitty way of leaving out candidates, Andrew Yang especially, but to a lesser extent, you also give mostly negative press to Bernie Sanders and to Tulsi Gabbard. The way that you're acting, it feels like you have not learned your lessons from 2016. Does it have to take another Donald Trump presidential term for you guys to finally understand what you're doing? I swear, between this and the identity politics crazies, these guys are going to gift wrap Donald Trump the 2020 election. And I'm promising you this, if that happens, I'm going to go on a massive rant. It'll just be one episode where I'm just going to go on a massive rant as to why the Democratic Party seems to have this time-honored tradition of shooting themselves in the dick. Look, the big reason why Hillary Clinton lost in 2016, other than the Electoral College, which in my opinion was unfair. I did think that since Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, she should have been president. But nevertheless, the reason why she lost in 2016 was because of 3 reasons. 1, the establishment media pushed her, and the DNC created a scandal in order to push Bernie Sanders out and allow Hillary Clinton to win the nomination with very little trouble, at least relatively, of what could have been in a fair race. Number 2, she left out the Midwest states in her rallies. She never went to those Midwestern states. She had taken them for granted, and as a result, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania went to Donald Trump. And third, identity politics was one of the centerpieces of her campaign, which to me is always, and it doesn't matter who it is, a losing strategy. It makes you look so small tent, and the bigger tent, most of the time, is going to win the election. And now, here you see the mainstream media doing it again. They have learned nothing from 2016. They are gift wrapping Donald Trump this election by ignoring candidates like Andrew Yang or giving negative press, mostly negative press, to candidates like Bernie Sanders or Tulsi Gabbard. They might have been able to fly with that back in the past, like 10, 20 years ago, but in this age of the internet media, people can see right through that shit. An unfair treatment like this could mean the difference between that person voting for the candidate that you want if they won fairly and voting for your candidate's opponent if the candidate that they chose or they preferred did not win the nomination. And if we get 4 more years of Donald Trump, I swear I am going to be on a live podcast and I am just going to go off on the Democrat Party because I am tired of them constantly doing this. I mean, they talk about that they want to be the party of equality, the party of tolerance, the party of giving everyone a fair opportunity. And then they go and they pull shit like this. This is why everyone complains so much about the Democrats having superdelegates. The Republicans didn't have superdelegates. They, surprisingly enough, were more likely to allow a candidate who's an outsider to win their nomination because they don't have superdelegates, and the media, more or less, does show them in a slightly more fair light. Now, granted, Donald Trump was treated negatively by the press, but he also had a very huge following, and there were people there that tried to be fairly balanced on the Republican side. That is, I'm talking about on Fox News. But it's really clear there is no fair and balance here. This is clear as day. They're leaving Andrew Yang out. They're giving negative press to Bernie Sanders, Tulsi Gabbard, to a lesser extent, Marianne Williamson and Elizabeth Warren. This is BS. And seriously, they have to stop, because I don't want another 4 more years of Trump. I am too worried about trying to fix and reform our healthcare system that I think another 4 years of Trump is pretty much going to knock that out of the water for a generation. And I don't want the Supreme Court to get any more conservative than they are. Otherwise, it won't matter how many Democrat presidents that we have from here on out. The Supreme Court is going to shut down anything involving healthcare or any seriously progressive policies to help people out, and we will have a conservative Supreme Court and continuous conservative rulings for a generation. As I have said before to the Democrats, liberals, especially the establishment, don't fuck this up. But who am I kidding? You guys will. I just hope you don't fuck it up enough that we still have the annoying orange in office for 4 more years. I mean, okay, here's what I'm worried about. And you guys follow my train of thought here. If you've seen me on Twitter, you've heard me talk about this before. But here's my worry. My worry is, I need to clear my throat for this one. My theory is that the mainstream media is going to do exactly what they did in 2016 and anoint Joe Biden, or maybe Kamala Harris, because there are a couple that like Kamala Harris too, but anoint one of these two people. They might even take Elizabeth Warren too, because I know they're starting to get a little bit positive with her too, so they might see her as some kind of a compromise with the progressives and the establishment. But they're going to take one of these candidates, and they're going to cart them out, and they're just going to ignore the voices of everybody else, especially those like, the Yang supporters or the Tulsi supporters or the Bernie supporters. And what they'll do is they're going to make these voters feel disenfranchised in the primary, and a significant, I'm not going to say most of them, but a significant portion of them are going to switch to the other side and vote for Donald Trump. And enough of them will vote for Donald Trump that in the states that are swing states, the Democrat is going to lose again, and the mainstream media gift wraps the election to Donald Trump for a second term. And you know what? My theory with this is that I think the mainstream media wants this. I really think that they want this, not because they like Donald Trump, but because this guy does so much stupid crap, and this guy does so much damage that he's amazing for cable news ratings. You can't stop talking about this guy. We're talking about a guy who is so full of himself. He had to talk to a Fox News correspondent, got in a fight with the NOAA, and switched a weather report, or changed a weather report with a Sharpie to show that Hurricane Dorian was going to hit Alabama, or would have originally hit Alabama. This is how full of himself and how much of a 9-year-old this president acts. And while they might not like it, it's awesome for ratings. People can't get enough talking about this guy. This is why I don't talk about Trump very much. I'd rather talk about the technical issues of the election, of the primary, and later on when we get to the general, talk about the general and see where each of the Republican and Democrat candidates stands. But we know that the media needs to have ratings, because without ratings, they don't get the money from advertisers. And without that money, they cease to function as a network. So they have to push towards sensationalism. And who better for sensationalism than the annoying orange himself, President Trump? So it makes sense that you would want to keep him in the office so you can have good ratings. If you put in a more boring guy out there like Andrew Yang or even Bernie Sanders, yeah, you might have a little bit of fun in the short term, but overall, they're way more boring than Donald Trump. People are not going to listen to your cable news station to hear about all the good things that they're doing. They want to see, oh, what crazy thing are they doing this week? So I think subconsciously, for their own financial, what's the word for it? For their own financial survival, I think, this mainstream media would not mind or even like Donald Trump to serve a second term for their own cable news ratings. Because bad news is good news in their rating system, after all. It keeps people watching, right? I mean, they don't care if we have universal health care. They don't care if we can solve the income inequality problem. They don't care if we have, issues regarding morals even, As long as they can keep eyes glued to their TV screen, that's all that matters to them. And that's what I think of the mainstream media. Chicken sandwich mania. What I promised last week that I was going to talk about. Chicken sandwiches. So, if you all remember last month, I went to Popeyes. And Popeyes, I had their chicken sandwich. And I said it definitely was better than Chick-fil-A. However, two other brands seem to want to bring themselves into the conversation. And that being KFC and Wendy's. Now, I have already done the KFC chicken sandwich. Now, granted, it was the Cheetos version, but I was able to get the texture of the KFC sandwich and tell you guys how I liked it so much. So I went to Wendy's. I had their chicken sandwich twice. Now, the reason why I did that was not necessarily because I liked it, but I always try to have it twice if possible. So that way I got an idea in my mind of how I think about the sandwich. I always do this all the time. Like, I will always do something twice. Like, you'll see later on today, I watched most of the Climate Town Hall twice for that very same reason. Anyway, I now have a ranking amongst these four brands, of course, of the best chicken sandwich. And by the way, I do have a winner, and it's not any of these four brands. So coming in at number 5, matter of fact, is KFC. KFC definitely was the worst. And number 4, Chick-fil-A. I feel like Chick-fil-A is a little bit too plain for my tastes. And I mean, don't get me wrong, it's still a really good chicken sandwich. But I'm just not I'm a big fan of crispiness, and it doesn't really have too much crispiness in it. At number 3, Wendy's. Now, like I said, Wendy's was really good overall. And I really did enjoy the texture and the flavor. And whatever they put into the new recipe for their chicken sandwich, keep it up, guys. Keep it up. Wendy's definitely did better than Chick-fil-A to me. However, of the 4, number 2, the winner, Popeyes, for sure. But let me tell you the real winner here. If you want the best chicken sandwich, number 1, I know that this is not a drive-through place, but you guys really have to go here. Cracker Barrel. Now, Cracker Barrel has a fried chicken sandwich as well. It's like $8. You can get it after 11 a.m. And the texture of their chicken is way better than any of the other 4 fast food joints. Get delivery or something. I'm pretty sure a lot of bigger cities have DoorDash or something like that. But if you want my recommendation, the winner of Chicken Sandwich Mania is definitely Cracker Barrel. So that is the very short report of Chicken Sandwich Mania. I was going to originally make this a little bit longer, but like I said, I have a lot of stuff to go through today, and I don't think you guys want me to start describing the textures of different types of chicken for 3-4 minutes, especially for those of you that probably don't eat chicken very much, or who don't eat meat very much at all. You guys are going to be like, oh no, this is offensive. So I'm going to say, screw that, and let's move on. Normally, when someone says that they find something offensive, I honestly don't give a shit. But even I don't want to talk about the textures of chicken and meat, because I'm not very good at describing those things anyway. However, while chicken sandwich media may be over, I will say that I have friends that tell me I need to try out this new food that's coming out from KFC called the Impossible Fried Chicken. Or, I'm sorry, Beyond Fried Chicken. My bad. KFC's Beyond Fried Chicken had sold out in 5 hours at an Atlanta area location that it was being tested at. So if it does come to my area, I promise you I am going to review that. And I will try it out and tell you guys what I think of it. And if I like it compared to regular chicken, because I do love me fried chicken, but I'm not quite sure about plant-based stuff. I mean, I've had plant-based stuff in the past. I had an ex once who went vegan for a while and had a lot of those Beyond Meat burgers, and I mean, a lot of them more or less just don't feel like that they have the same texture, and they also made me a little sick for some reason. Like, I would have some digestive problems afterwards. So, I mean, I have to keep that in mind as well. But other than that, I will give it a shot. All right? So, expect me to try out the Beyond Fried Chicken sometime in the short to medium term future. The official seatings for the third debate have been announced on ABC. Now, for those of you that do not know, the third debate will happen on September the 12th. And they have laid out the official seating chart, or standing chart, because, I mean, they're going to stand. They're not going to be sitting down. This debate's going to be 3 hours long, though. So, I mean, you would think that they would have to have some kind of a chair or something, because I couldn't imagine standing in one place for 3 hours, or at least give them a chance to move in between breaks. You know what I mean? Anyway, the seating chart was somewhat interesting. I did see a couple of surprises, though. Biden, I guess, is to the center left. So that basically means that anyone to the left of him will be the odd seeds. And anyone to the right of Elizabeth Warren is the even seeds. Now, Elizabeth Warren has been recognized as the number 2, according to ABC, which is very interesting indeed. I mean, at the time, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders were kind of neck and neck, but I think Bernie Sanders was still second place on the Real Clear Politics poll averages. Going down the line at number 3, he will be to the left of Joe Biden. That's Bernie Sanders, who in my opinion should actually be, or at least at the time, should have been number 2 in the polls, but nevertheless. Number 4 on the list right now is Kamala Harris. She will be to the right of Elizabeth Warren. Now, to the left of Bernie Sanders at number 5 will be Mayor Pete Buttigieg. And here's the second big surprise. Number 6, to the right of Kamala Harris, again, Andrew Yang. Now, I'm talking about this in an analysis sense. This means that ABC recognizes Andrew Yang as the 6th place candidate. They see him as the 6th seed. Now, I know a lot of people felt like as long as they didn't move him all the way at the end, they would be happy. But that he is this close to the center on stage should really mean something. And yes, he is basically, he's not in the center, but he's not exactly in the far ends either. Now, moving on to number 7, Cory Booker, Beto O'Rourke, originally 6th place, is now moved into the 8th seed spot to the right of Andrew Yang. Number 9, Amy Klobuchar? Okay. She's polling like 0.8. And her counterpart on the far right at number 10, Julian Castro, I believe, is polling a little bit better than her. But nevertheless, I mean, I have a couple problems regarding this seating. But overall, I am a little bit satisfied. Obviously, the Yang supporter in me is very satisfied at him being number 6. I'm a little bit confused at the Bernie and Warren seating. I think Bernie did belong in the center. But nevertheless, this is a good opportunity for all of the heavyweights to finally duke it out. I do think that Bernie and Warren will probably continue to team up. I do not see Bernie ever attacking Elizabeth Warren, and I do not ever see Elizabeth Warren attacking Bernie Sanders. So I think that the two could continue to team up and try to take down the rest of the competition. I do think that Andrew Yang is going to be a little bit more heavily targeted this time, particularly by Sanders and Warren. Now, it's not a matter of, Yang is too centrist or not, but it is a matter of the difference in thinking of progressive policy. Now, Bernie does not agree with UBI, and Yang does not agree with the federal job guarantee. So obviously there's going to be some sort of a clash there. Expect that to happen. Expect Biden to be taking shots from just about everybody outside of maybe Andrew Yang and Amy Klobuchar. Andrew Yang because he's not a very confrontational person, but I do expect him to get into confrontations a little bit more this time around. While I will say that his strategy should be focused on pulling himself away from UBI a little bit more and focusing more on his other flagship policies, like human-centered capitalism, maybe more on his climate change plan. If he does that, I think that he has a chance of moving even closer to the center of the podium next time around. maybe even getting a center spot if he can move up into the top 4 for the October debates, because I do believe the October debates will be 2 nights. I do think Steyer and Gabbard will make their way in, making it 6 and 6. I'm also expecting Beto O'Rourke to be probably the most aggressive candidate of the night. I mean, he is losing his spot and he's slowly starting to slip away. We're talking about a guy here who was projected to be within the top 4 candidates, and now he has slipped all the way to 8th place, at least according to the ABC seating board anyway. He technically is 8th in the Real Clear Politics polls as well, but still, just him slipping this far down, expect him, well, I guess a lot of it does depend on, does he still plan on wanting to be president, or is he planning on dropping out to run for the Texas Senate? And it's looking like that he's going to do the former, so if he does, expect him to be very aggressive. Expect him to go all out. I can see Beto just going all out and going to town on everyone, trying to catch them on all their mistakes, on all their flubs, on all their past records. Expect Beto O'Rourke to come on strong here. And especially after the shootings in Odessa, and of course earlier El Paso as well, expect Beto to really come on strong. I mean, I'm expecting him to, let's see, he spoke Spanish in the first debate. He started cursing in the last week or so. So maybe he can put them together and start cursing in Spanish for the next debate. Hey, that'd be interesting. Plus, it'd be very hard for them to censor it. Well, unless you're Univision, then you'll probably hear a lot of bleeps in Univision. I don't know. It's something like that anyway. But I would just like to see him curse in Spanish once at one of the candidates for anything. It would just be hilarious. I think that Cory Booker, after the climate change town hall, which I will be talking about in a little bit, as well as the last debate, I think he can come out and break out as a star on this debate stage if he does really well. I also think that Andrew Yang has the potential to do so as well, but in a different manner. Now, he's not as aggressive as Cory Booker, but he can try to bring his unique ideas in and grab a few more people. I do expect by November, the cutoff is going to be either 3% or 5% in the polls. One or the other. Expect a lot of these candidates in the bottom half of this to really start rallying to try to get that 3 to 5%. So it's still very much a do or die for them. Now, I will not have the debate review on the same night like I did with the Detroit debate, just letting you all know, because I am going to a watch party, a pro-Yang watch party, matter of fact. And I plan to do some tweets. I want to try to do a play-by-play. No promises, though, that I'll be able to do as many as I normally do anyways, because I don't know if I'll be able to bring my laptop or not to be able to type fast. I am a fast typer, way faster typer than I am a texter. So if I do text, it's going to be a little bit slower, just letting you all know. But instead of doing a short, debate summary, I'm going to have a guest on next week, Jonathan Munitz, and I hope I pronounced that correctly, from the Hill of Roses podcast, will be joining me next week as we review the third debate from Houston. Well, I mean, we're not actually going to be in Houston, Texas, but the debate is in Houston, Texas. All right, we are now moving on to the climate change town hall. It was a 7-hour town hall, holy moly, that happened on CNN on Wednesday. The 10 candidates that are participating in the debate on September 12th all participated in this climate change town hall in the order: Julian Castro, Andrew Yang, Kamala Harris, Amy Klobuchar. Then they took a break. That was followed by Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, I believe, went next, then Beto O'Rourke, and finally, Cory Booker. And I'm just going to go through just a few key notes here of what each candidate said and how they presented themselves and how the crowd responded. I'm going to go through it in the order of how I rated them. Now, I did give an unofficial score on Twitter, but I'm going to go through the 10 from 1 to 10 and give you my rating here. At number 10, with an abysmal 1.5 out of 10, Good old glass Joe Biden. I gave him a half a point, mainly because he actually gave a couple policies, like his $400 billion into research and development over climate change and wanting to create a standard for appliances, regulating and limiting fracking, and wanting to take combustion energy vehicles off the road as quickly as we can. But the way he presented it, and on top of that, just the fact that he went to a fundraiser with top oil executives the following day, and just the entire presentation, you can tell that he was pretty much just dragged out there kicking and screaming. And, man, you can just tell something is up with Joe Biden. I don't know what it is. But this guy, this is not the Joe Biden of old. This guy is scary in a sense that I fear that he might not be able to last the campaign the way that he is acting right now. And if he does, in fact, become the nominee, and he currently leads right now, and he faces Donald Trump, and he, for whatever reason, I hope it doesn't happen, becomes incapacitated. What happens at that point? Has that ever happened before in an election? I'm not sure. But we'll have to see, I guess. I guess maybe his vice presidential running mate runs if he has one at that point. Which in that case, yeah, his VP means a lot, but you can tell he's just forgetting things. He seems to have difficulty even knowing where he is at times. It's actually kind of worrisome. And just watching this was just pitiful. Oh my goodness. That's all I'm going to say about that. I mean, I just feel kind of bad watching that. And I'm not the only one. Even the mainstream media said that he was a big loser of the climate change town hall. At number 9, Julian Castro, probably with the disadvantage of going first, so he had to set the bar, and that was a pretty low bar that he set. He got really, really nervous with his cell phone. His cell phone actually went off during it. He also got really nervous on many of the questions, and you could tell he had long pauses in a couple of those questions, too, with his responses. But regarding policy, he wants all renewable electricity by 2035, net zero emissions by 2045, and he also set the tone for the term that I really am just not a real big fan of, environmental justice. Anything plus justice. I feel like when the left and liberals use it, it just gets this bad taste in my mouth, and I really wish that they came up with a better word for that. And also, he talked about ending Citizens United and raise the youngest generation in a more environmentally conscious way. Final score of 3.5 out of 10. Number 8, with a 4.5 out of 10, is Kamala Harris. Now, my issue with her wasn't actually her presentation. She did really well there. But I feel like a lot of her policies did too much while not fixing the problem enough. She really pushed towards, like, banning plastic straws and, banning fracking. She did say she wanted a net zero country by 2045. And she also says stop denying the science, leaders need to lead. And that she would get rid of the filibuster to pass the Green New Deal. I know there's a lot of people saying, let's get rid of the filibuster. I personally think it is bad policy. Because if the Republicans get a hold of it, then they will wildly change everything. Now, you guys are planning on plans here for the Green New Deal and that would be easily 2, 3, 4, 5 presidents down the road. So you better hope every single president is a Democrat, because if a Republican comes in, then all of those rules and regulations that you were planning on for climate change, they all go away. Well, there is one way that a president can't easily break, and that would be an amendment. But Kamala Harris did not talk about amendments in her case, so 4.5 out of 10. Like I said, she talked about too many restrictions while not seeming to really solve the problem effectively. Now, overall, I gave these 3 a negative rating. I'm going to move on now to the 2 that I gave a neutral rating. Pete Buttigieg, number 7, with a 5.5 out of 10. He did present fairly well. I do have a couple notes of interest for him. I would like to know more about his health equity zones idea. Also, another interesting point of his that caught my eye, subsidizing driving, which I find very interesting because I know that when fossil fuel subsidies go away, as most of these candidates want to get rid of the fossil fuel subsidies, the price of gas is going to go up. So the idea of subsidizing driving, maybe over like commercial air travel, is what he's saying. But I would like to know something about that. I have 2 problems, though, with him. And that is his use of the term generational justice. Again, throw a word, add justice, make it sound, imperative that we must do this. And, of course, he uses the God card. Now, I have said this before with Pete Buttigieg. Look, the religious left is not as big as you think. How is that religious left doing, Mayor Pete? Oh, look at that. You're 4%. And Andrew Yang is passing you in a couple polls. A guy who has like 1/10 the funding you do. Some religious left there, huh? This is what I'm saying. Christianity is associated, especially evangelical Christianity, is associated with Republicans, the right, conservatives, Reaganism, Trumpism, Bushism. To try to make the Christian religion, a left matter. I mean, I get it. A lot of people say, Jesus would have been left-wing. But the Christian religion, as we see it over the last 40 years, has been predominantly right-wing. Evangelical Christians, 85-90% for Trump. Christians in general always have voted Republican since the days of Ronald Reagan. Pete, you're fighting a losing battle, and you fought a losing one here. Number 6, with a 6 out of 10, Elizabeth Warren. I'll tell you this much, guys. I'll have what she's having, because at this point, I was already just beaten down by that horrible Biden forum segment, and I had to go back and take a look at Bernie Sanders', and I'll get to him in a little bit. But the one thing I noticed with Elizabeth Warren is she did not really talk about too much policy. She really pushed a lot of theory and science, and she talked about how she's a big believer of science. She did have a couple policies in there, but they were basically just standard, your standard everyday policies like, stop lobbying. Her big card she turned to was the corruption card, but she didn't really use it very much. And then she also talked about how nuclear energy was a little risky, and she wanted to put the money instead into science research and development, which is basically kind of a common theme amongst a lot of the more intelligentsia here. But yeah, that's pretty much all I can really say about her. Oh, and I think she wanted to open source patents for some reason as well. So yeah, 6 out of 10. The best thing I can say is she had a lot of enthusiasm, very perky, and I really could use some of whatever the heck she's having right now, matter of fact, because it is late at the time of this recording, and I am getting pretty tired. Number 5, with a 6.5 out of 10, Beto O'Rourke. Now, with him, he did an amazing first half. He just came out, talked policy, and he just went with bullet point after bullet point after bullet point. But then, towards the second half, he really started running out of steam, and I was like, no, come on, Beto. You were doing so well. But this seems to be how his campaign has been all along. He starts off great, but then he just runs out of steam halfway through. I just hope his plan for climate change is not like that. He set a 2050 net zero line with the halfway mark at 2030, which means he kind of expects his plan to run out of steam because he expects us to get halfway there in 10 years and then take twice as long to go the rest of the way. Yeah, that's real confidence there, my friend. He wants to re-enter the Paris Climate Agreement. Again, he wants to go beyond that. That's standard with the exception of the beyond. He wants to start immediate net zero emissions on public lands and a cap and trade system, allowances granted or sold to polluters, and fully fund disaster response agencies. And that is Beto at number 5. Now we're going to the positives. At number 4, Bernie Sanders. Now, Bernie Sanders got the second most cheers of the night. I rated him a 7 out of 10, and much of that is because I admit I'm not a big fan of his policy, but I try to keep it as technical as possible. He did talk. The one thing that I will say that I agree with him on that was a little bit controversial was when they talked about population control. And first off, just that he was the only one that got this question is really unfair to Bernie Sanders. And it definitely felt like, this is a very controversial topic. It's a very touchy topic. A lot of independents, a lot of conservatives don't like talking about this topic very much. Even a lot of Democrats aren't very fond of talking about this topic either, but it has to be talked about. The subject of overpopulation. And the way that Bernie Sanders handled it, I felt like he handled it with a lot of aplomb. And actually, that was one of the cases where I agreed with him. And to me, the subject of overpopulation is going to be inevitable, eventually, like UBI. What I wasn't a fan of was the idea to spend $16 trillion over 10 years, and I feel like a lot of independents and conservatives will not like that idea either, but he did give out a good delivery of it, so while I don't agree with him, he actually thought out his plan, unlike a lot of others that felt like that they were just going through talking points. And he definitely feels like that he really believes in this plan. So that is why I put Bernie Sanders a lot higher, even though I feel like a lot of his policies can be damaging. So in a technical sense, he did do a good job. And actually, you could have him as an argument for number 3. Because number 3, this will shock everyone, number 3 is Amy Klobuchar with a 7.5 out of 10. Now, Amy Klobuchar actually put out a lot of policy, and I have the second most notes of any candidate, only 2, and I will talk about who later on. But she had the second most notes of any candidate in the night for me, and she had a lot of policy here that I could agree with. I'm just going to highlight a few of it, though, for you. For example, bringing back the International Climate Change Agreement, clean power rules, gas mileage standards. She also was one of only 2 people, Bernie Sanders included in this one, that had an overall climate change funding plan. In her case, it was $3 trillion. I believe it was over 10 years herself, and she knew how to get the funding for it as well. And she said that was on her website, I guess. She's ready to train adults that suit the skills that they have, dietary guidelines to adjust for environmental impact, changes to new buildings, energy storage and appliance standards. And also, this one's the most intriguing from her, wanting to create a competition amongst households to see who can use less energy. That's actually in having incentives for those that are the top earners. So that was actually pretty interesting to see myself. Basically seeing Amy Klobuchar take advantage of human psychology there, that human need for competition, and using that to try to lower our energy costs on a micro level. Number 2, Andrew Yang. Now, I know a lot of people... by the way, first off, I rated him a 7.5 out of 10 as well, but I feel like he beat out Amy Klobuchar. I have the most notes for him of any candidate. Now, obviously, your mileage may vary. A lot of people actually did not like Andrew Yang's performance during this, but a lot of it is because his ideas are very unique, and that uniqueness can kind of scare a few people off, especially those who are fans of the Green New Deal. Now, first off, he said rejoin the Paris Accord, end fossil fuel subsidies. He talked about using democracy dollars to wash out the lobbyist cash. So he's got a little bit of a corruption thing there, a little bit of warring going on there. I can see that. He talked about also creating a carbon-free America by 2050, and also encouraging nuclear power, including thorium reactors, by saying we need to try everything, even methods that are unproven. Where I feel Andrew Yang suffered, though, is when they talked about electric cars, and he made it sound like, electric cars are awesome, people will like it. Even though, it's kind of a backhanded way of saying, yeah, you're going to be forced to eventually drive electric cars instead of gas guzzlers. And that could come off a little bit hokey. I think a lot of people can read between the lines. At least some people, especially independents and conservatives, can read between the lines on that. And especially some liberals as well, probably thinking that he's not going far enough in being imperative the way that say, Bernie Sanders would. So other than that, though, Andrew Yang did a pretty good job. 7.5 out of 10 at number 2. Number one, to me, the overall technical winner of the debate, even though Andrew Yang did get the most cheers overall of the night, Cory Booker came up with the most interesting ideas of the night, talking about, and by the way, he got an 8 out of 10 from me, banning oil and fracking. He came at us with a presentation where he just went point after point after point for a good 30 minutes. Andrew Yang also did that as well, but I felt like that a couple of his points were a little bit shaky. But with Cory Booker, he was just solid on, and I honestly thought he got more cheers than what I saw this graph say that he did, because I noticed he got quite a few applauses on a lot of his statements, so that actually surprised me a little bit. I'm not quite sure if that number is accurate or not, and I'm telling you, like I said earlier, between this, the Climate Change Forum, and how well he did, and how well he did in the second debate, Cory Booker, alongside Andrew Yang, have the opportunity to be breakout stars coming out of the third debate. And I would not be surprised if we see a surge with one of those two. Kamala Harris and Pete Buttigieg are definitely being put on notice here. And especially with, in this case, after what had been a mediocre, at best, performance from those two in this climate change town hall, I'm a little worried at what they could do during the September debate. But overall, other comments of the overall debate, 7 hours, holy moly, did we really, at first I felt, after looking at Julian Castro, did we really need 40 minutes per person? But then after I saw Andrew Yang, I was like, you know what, 40 minutes might not actually be enough, especially for some candidates. Because I know there were a couple points that Andrew Yang wanted to bring out that he didn't have the chance to bring out during the town hall. Bernie Sanders had sort of the same thing, and it looked like Cory Booker as well. So if they know what they're saying and they're really passionate about the topic, then yeah, they could go even an hour. But for a lot of them, it felt like they were just saying the same things over and over and over again. And I'm just like, and I get it, we have to give them equal time, and CNN has been doing a good job with that. But some of these candidates clearly did not need 40 minutes. Those like Julian Castro and Glass Joe Biden. Speaking of, I have to give the moment of the night during the Joe Biden segment, and this was really hilarious. Doctoral candidate from Northwestern University, Isaac Larkin, asked Joe Biden, how can you be in this town hall and give us all these promises when tomorrow you're going to visit a fundraiser with oil executives and energy executives? And right there, I had actually said in a tweet about half an hour beforehand, someone needs to ask Joe Biden about this, and who wants to take up to that task? Mr. Larkin, you took up to that task, and I salute you, sir. Great job. That was absolutely awesome. I loved it. And guess what? Joe Biden went to the fundraiser anyway, because of course he is. He feels like he's Teflon. He can't do anything wrong, right? He's up by like 10 points. Who's going to watch anyway, right? But if he performs as poorly in the third debate as he did during the climate change town hall, I guarantee you there are going to be a lot more eyes watching this time, especially because all the heavyweights have come out to play. I'm telling you, that could really, really hurt Joe Biden in the polls. I really think these third debates is going to decide who is going to make that next cut of whether it be 3% or 5%, one of those two, I think. Who will make that next cut, especially amongst the bottom half of candidates, basically from Yang on down to Castro, and even Pete Buttigieg in a way, and Kamala Harris, and who's going to get left out. And in Joe Biden's case, though, I know he's not going to have to worry. He'll probably go through the entire primary and probably even win a state or two at worst case scenario. However, with Joe Biden, he could very well lose his lead if he's not careful. And he keeps gaffing like this and forgetting things and completely screwing up and pretending like that this is the politics of 1990. It's not. So final thoughts regarding this going into the next debate. Like I said, Biden's in danger. Kamala and Pete better watch themselves. And I think Yang and Booker especially have a lot of room to grow. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So with that, I now have a couple minutes left. Let's talk about Trump and Hurricane Dorian, shall we? So we all know that Hurricane Dorian, the National Weather Service had talked about the path of the hurricane and where its probability was. And I guess at one time early on, they talked about the path of the hurricane, like it would just gently brush Alabama at like 30 knots an hour or something. And Trump goes on and talks about that the states of Florida, Georgia, and Alabama are going to be affected by the hurricane. And the weather services all talked with him. I believe the NOAA and the National Weather Service talked to him and said that, no, the hurricane is not going to hit Alabama. And not taking no for an answer, Donald Trump holds a press conference and shows the path of the hurricane and takes a Sharpie and extends the path of the hurricane so that it touches a part of Alabama, so that way he can say that it's attacking Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. Okay. This honestly, now, a few days ago, I was actually laughing my ass off about this because this genuinely was pretty funny to watch. And this is one where I'm just like, you can tell Donald Trump has the pettiness of a 9-year-old, the way that he acts. He has to be right. He must be right about everything. He kept not just arguing with the National Weather Service over and over, but with a correspondent. He tweeted on Wednesday, "See, I saw the path of the hurricane, and it says that it's going through Alabama. I was right. Just, oh my God. Oh, geez. And while the hurricane moves up towards the Carolinas, towards Virginia, towards New England, Donald Trump still talks to a Fox News correspondent that the hurricane was supposed to go through Alabama. He's still talking about this, and I have a feeling he's still going to talk about it after the hurricane goes away. Oh my goodness. He just will not let this go. And I get it. I know how it feels, that need to be right, but come on, man. You're the president. No one cares if you got this wrong. I got through Alabama. Okay, you make a mistake. You've made plenty of mistakes. This one is actually very, very, very minor compared to a lot of other mistakes you've made. Let it go. But needless to say, he can't be wrong. Not once. So he's got to bash this until the end of time. Matter of fact, it'll probably be on his gravestone. Here lies Donald Trump. I told you that hurricane was going through Alabama. Will probably be the quote on his gravestone or something, because holy moly, this guy cannot be wrong. He cannot. It's got to be some kind of OCD or something. Anyway, I just had to give you guys a bit of a laugh on that one. So that's the show, everyone. If you like what you see, come follow me on Twitter at Cynical Centrist. I also put up my Discord twice a week. You can go check it out there. Go check me out on YouTube as well as Podbean, cynicalcentrist.podbean.com. And, of course, I have my YouTube link as well. All new videos come out on Saturday, and Jonathan Munitz will be here next week to talk with me regarding the September debate. So until then, just remember, if I'm not pissing you off, I'm not doing my job. Bye, everybody.